for instance, they held the eagle. I mean, check this out. They had the owl, they had the eagle, and they had the hawks. These were actually titles that they used for their various priests. They referred to Mithras himself as the son of the sun. They referred to their ministers as children of the sun, or soldiers of Mithras, you see. And the lion and the eagle and the hawk. These are symbols that you find on so many corporate advertisements. You find it on architecture. You find it on money. You find it on the medals. You find it on the royal heraldry. All these Merovingian Templar royal families. You find these very Mithraic symbols. Like I said, the Mithras, the crown, is even being used. She found out that, for instance, it was on a Gnostic papyrus that actually came out of Egypt, and that was dated from about the 2nd or 3rd century. There was a quotation on it, and it arrived in England, and it was translated, and the quote said, "This is not wine, this is the blood of Osiris." And it had a picture of like a carving of a piece of bread, and it said, "This is not bread, this is the body of Osiris." Right? Over the gates of the temple of Dendera, it actually said, "Come unto me, all ye who are like heavy laden, and I'll give thee rest." I went into all of this in the astrotheology DVD I did. So you can barely find a name, you can barely find a story, like the raising of Lazarus, or the walking on the water, or the marriage of Cana. All the things that, Christians take at face value and never even question, or even have a very sketchy idea of what it was, is all rooted in either astrotheology, sidereal mythology, some form of cosmology of the ancient world. And we're still doing catch up on that. We're still trying to deal with that. And then I go further and say, look, half of these people that run the religious institutions of the world, and certainly the royalist orgs, are the very parasites that are keeping man in a state of total arrested development on all levels, not just socially, politically, and so on. And then what they do is they offer you a bunch of superficial benefits to incarcerate your to decorate your incarceration, to give us this idea, this veneer, that we're actually very civilized. And that's what Aldous Huxley's talking about, and it's going to become pharmacological tomorrow. It already is. Mm-hmm. They say that the usage of drugs in England have risen by 400% in recent years. They're now even legalizing certain other kinds of drugs, because they ultimately know that we're in a situation of complete psychological meltdown. One of the things that happens when this takes place is that people then, what they do is there's a psychological word, which is sublimation or compensation, in which you then say, you start worrying about other forms of meltdown, like social, economic, climate, etc. Because there's a penchant in the human mind that refuses to do inner homework. It refuses to realize that the root of all problems is psychological. And just when there is about to be what you might want to call an apocalypse or a great change, a sea change, it's very common that the human mind, not just individually, but collectively, projects it outwards. And I've been seeing this now for many, many years. And therefore you have all these scares and all this external meltdowns. And it's because the psyche of man enjoys that, because that's the escape route. If you can point to continually external things being the reason, right, for decay, and the reason for social chaos or whatever, that's brilliant, because now you don't actually have to take true responsibility. And man has done this aeon after aeon after aeon. He always finds a way out of taking personal responsibility. And now we're in this age of awakening. Astrologically, we're in the age of Pluto. There's a lot to do with Shiva-like energy and so forth and so on. And this is where people now have a chance again to really understand what are the root causes of all forms of tyranny. And if they don't do that, then they're going to buy into every little, bugbear, every kind of homunculus behind the curtain, every shadow that can be thrown up, and every kind of excuse. And then with another part of their mind, because that's a lie, by doing that you're in a lie mechanism, you'll not feel comfortable with that lie, and so you'll build up even more anxiety. And then in come the big pharma, and all of these other methodologies to say, okay, we know what you can do with that. Lose yourself in TV, lose yourself in work, lose yourself in gurus and cults, and lose yourself in drugs and drink and all these other things you see that they hope will take care of it, or lose yourself in some sort of political activity.
The Great Distraction. Yeah, The Great Distraction. Absolutely. I mean, that's the reason why I wanted to do this show, because it seemed like a distraction to keep people from looking into Helena Blavatsky's work, saying, hey, don't look at this. This is evil. This is satanic. Don't look at it. But when I opened it up, I realized, wow, wait a minute. There's a whole lot of truth here. Let me go to the caller lines real quick. We've had a caller holding since the beginning of the broadcast, and I want to give him an opportunity to pose his question. Will, you're on the air.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're on with Michael.
Hey, Mike, big fan. Love all your work. Fantastic. I've been recently reading Wilhelm Reich, character analysis, sexuality and anxiety. In regards to sexual gratification, from the Wilhelm Reich perspective, he says that it is pretty much the final key issue to curing neurosis, but it is very difficult to gratify oneself. And he believes in pornography and all that and being open, and I concur with that. But what would you recommend in the case of, since I wrote Soul Proliferate with so many neurotics, excluding the organ therapy, to curing neurosis without having relations with other neurotics?
Interesting question. Thank you for the call.
Well, I hope I got the question right. He's asking me, what do I recommend other than orgone teachings within a sort of a Reichian context that might help with neurosis and things like that?
Yes.
Well, you see, here we're into an area that is really a very, very important topic for me. And I think there also has to be great caution with any kind of roadmap. What I mean by that is that it's important that people do not try to get into an A to Z type of way, like somebody setting themselves up as an expert to tell another person what that will entail. This is, I think, been one of the problems of the past, and I don't think it's right. If we were to just talk, sort of loosely, I might say, as I've done on various occasions, oh, you should get into the work of, Alexander Lowen and look into bioenergetics, or, hey, why don't you, go over and read Arno Gruen or R.D. Lang, and of course we can reference, and I try to do that in my professional work on the blog, forum, and in the sources, and I don't mind doing that to a certain extent by saying, oh, you have an interest here, check out this, or check out some more of Wilhelm Reich's lesser known works like Listen, Little Man, or The Mass Psychology of, Fascism, or whatever, and continue the studies. But when it comes to individuals asking seeking personal advice, I'm against that. I'm not picking you out, per se here. We're just talking, so I'm not singling you out or anything like that. I am just a person who really strongly believes that each individual must make that journey on their own. They must find out what works for them, because I am extremely against any kind of sort of A to Z kind of mapping, so in other words, you might take a piece from somebody else that you say, hey, that worked for them, or they recommend it, but I'm very much against that in a way, because it's very, very collectivist, and therefore I'm not a collectivist, so therefore it must be that you must find your own unique way, because remember, the way out of neurosis, first of all, is to see it as neurosis. I've always spoken about deconstruction. In order to solve the problem, you must get all the false things out of the way, in order to see the self, which is, in fact, you can't see it until you're first familiar with all the things that are not the self. You've got to study the mind in totality, and that might lead you then into Jungianism, or into Freudianism, or even into Blavatsky, or into occultism, or into Wilhelm Reich, or goodness knows where it will lead. You see, and that person then, it's the road that they're traveling is absolutely unique and independent. I can't insist upon this more, because it actually has a very strong metaphysical basis, because as a matter of fact, when you finally arrive at your so-called solution or revelation, it is not so much the ending and the gaining of the insight at the end that is important. In fact, you might even go so far as to say that the ending that you arrive at is entirely based on the steps that you've taken to get to that road. And this is what I always try to make clear, because we are so goal-oriented. We drag all our bad behavior and all our bad lessons into this world of psychological development, and also into the world of the occult. I like what Erich Fromm said Eric Fromm talked about mutability and doing basically what I'm saying, which is carve your own road out, because in fact the goal at which you arrive will be based on those 360 steps you took as you travel through the cycle, you see?